Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jay from Sony Alpha Lab, and what I got for you today is the Viltrox 50mm f1.8 lens. Now this is a full frame lens. It just came out for the Sony E-mount mirrorless camera systems, and it goes for about $380. So let's just get right into it. All right, so here she is in my hands, and as you can see, it's not that big. It's fairly compact, and it's very lightweight. It actually only weighs 12 ounces or 340 grams, so it's fairly lightweight. Now the lens hood can go on in both directions. I have it on in reverse mode right now. Just the lens cap just fell off there. It's got the pinch style lens cap. Looking at the front of the lens, you can see it's got a fairly small front lens element considering it's a fast aperture lens, but it's only f1.8. It's not like 0.95 or 1.4 or 1.2 or anything. It has a 55mm filter thread there, as you can see. One thing that's really cool about this lens is it has a manual aperture. So it makes it a little bit more powerful for video users. Anybody that wants to change the aperture manually, it's not clicked, it's very smooth, and it's pretty hard to turn, so you're not going to accidentally turn it, which I really like. And it has an auto mode, which is what I usually end up leaving it in, and I just change the aperture with the camera. But it's got like a pretty hard click, so you're not going to accidentally knock it off auto mode like some of the other lenses I've used over the years. Now looking at it from the back, you can see that large glass lens element in there, looking pretty good. It's got a nice metal lens flange here. It also has a USB-C port there to upgrade firmware. And that's a really nice feature. I'm glad that they include that because, you know, the autofocus algorithms change over time depending on cameras and stuff like that. So the ability to update the firmware, really nice. There is no rubber gasket on the back here, just so you're aware. So it doesn't have the best weather sealing as far as when it's mounted up to the camera. Focus ring feels extremely good. It's large and it feels very buttery. The aperture ranges from f1.8 all the way to f16. Now this is made for the full frame format. However, you can also use this on the crop factor format and it'll be approximately 75mm effective range on a crop factor camera. Now it's got 11 elements in 10 groups. It also has a nano lens coating and a resistance lens coating. It's got an internal focus, of course, and it's an STM autofocus motor. Now, the minimum focus distance is only 21.7 inches and 55 centimeters. This is just a quick focus transition test, basically, using the lab and video footage. So I have the camera set to f1.8 at 1/50th of a second. The ISO is at 125. I have that on auto right now. I have the autofocus transition speed set to 3, and I have the sensitivity responsiveness set to 4. So when I hold up the water bottle here, you will see the focus transition there. So let me move that and you'll see. So it works pretty good. I mean, for this, the focus is a little bit slow as far as photography goes, but when recording video, it's like silent and it works really well, as you can see here. So this is a pretty darn good option. All right, back in the lab here, just a quick focus throw. And watch the corner so you can see the focus breathing. A little bit of focus breathing there, not too crazy. Now here's just another autofocus transition test. I focused on the dollar bill from the quarter. Now I'm going back to the quarter. And now I'm going to go all the way to the background. I just focused on that molding, the white molding in the background there. And now all the way back to the quarter. And this lens was able to do it at the minimum focus distance. Very impressive. Now this is an aperture throw using the manual aperture ring. And I'm just going from f16 all the way to f1.8. All right, so here we are in Lightroom. I just want to go over some of these lab testing photos quickly. So this is at f1.8, and you can see up here on the top left will be the EXIF data, and I was shooting raw quality. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like when I enable the lens profile correction. And it pretty much fixes the slight distortion, as you can see, but also the fairly heavy vignetting that this lens has wide open at f1.8, and that's the darkening in the corners, which you can see brightening up there quite significantly. Now, if I zoom in here and you look at the corner detail at f1.8, you can see the sharpness is excellent all the way in the corner, which is really impressive. I was impressed by that. I didn't expect it to be that sharp. So one thing I did notice though here is the fringing in the out of focus area. You see this purple and green fringing? If I zoom in here, right there, you can see it. And it's pretty noticeable. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but if you stop it down, it starts to go away. This is at f2, this is at f2.8, and at f4 for the most part, most of it's gone. And 5.6, it's pretty much gone. So there is a little bit of that in the out of focus areas, just so you're aware. The Sony 50mm f1.8 lens also suffers from that, but in the real world, it's not that bad, and it's pretty easy to fix over here if you just enable the profile correction and remove chromatic aberration. So now if we scroll through here and we look at f2, you could see the sharpness just tacked up a little bit, nothing crazy. And then at f2.8, there is a noticeable increase in sharpness. Contrast is a little bit punchier. You can start to see a little bit more detail on the crayon and the pipe cleaners and stuff. So f4 or f2.8 is really looking good. And then when we get to f4, the lens is just razor blade sharp. So f4 is really where you need to be to get the maximum sharpness out of this lens. f5.6 also looks great, but f4 would be the minimum for that razor blade sharpness when using this lens. And if we scroll, you can see all the way to f11, and f16 is even sharp, but it does start to soften a little bit at f16 due to the diffraction, but nothing crazy. It actually holds up pretty darn well. Now, looking at the minimum focus distance here, which is approximately about 2 feet or 55 centimeters, 22 inches or so, if I zoom in on the quarter, you can see the sharpness looks great. I don't see any fringing, actually. In this case, there's pretty much none. Which is very impressive. And this is wide open at f1.8. So even over here on the coins, I expected to see some of that purple and green, but I don't really see any of it. Looks really, really good. All right, so let's go through an aperture run really quick. So this is f1.8, this is f2, f2.8, f4, 5, 6, f8, f11, and f16. Now, if I go back to f4, and zoom in here, you can see just how incredibly tack sharp that quarter is. Also notice that the bokeh balls do octagon. They start to octagon that little bit once you get past f2. So f2.8, you start to see the octagoning a little bit, and it gets more noticeable as you stop down. All right, let me show you how this thing compares to the Sony 50mm lens real quick at f1.8, and I think you'd be quite surprised at the similarities. All right, so on the left side, I have the Sony 50mm f1.8. Now, this is a lab test photo from a few years back. Also, I was using the A7R, so it's a higher resolution image, but still the comparison is really good. So you can see what we're looking at here. Now, because it's a higher resolution, it does kind of look like the Sony on the left is, sharper and crisper, but it's just because of the higher resolution more than anything. Sharpness is actually near identical on both lenses as far as I can tell here. So if we go to the corner area, you can see the Sony lens is very sharp in the corner, and they both suffer from vignetting. They both have a little bit of distortion, but not much. The Viltrox has a little bit more distortion than the Sony. But another thing I wanted to point out here was, notice the green halo around the lights on the Sony lens, and notice how the Viltrox does not have that. But you can see here the fringing on the Viltrox on this metal here, and the Sony is not suffering as much of that. So, it's like a give and take situation with these lenses. Which one's better, which one's not. To be honest with you, I think the Viltrox does have a little bit of an edge on sharpness when I was looking at some of the real world photos. But in this lab test, they do appear to be near identical. Crazy cool sky this morning. All right, so here we are looking at some of the real world photos I got. This was just a snapshot in the morning on my way to work. I had it at f4, which, as you saw in the lab testing, that's like where it really tacks up. There's just a landscape version view. Here's another one in the trees looking through. And again, if you zoom in here, you can see the details. It's like a nice silhouette effect. Really, really phenomenal. Now, I took a couple of pictures of my mountain bike, as you saw in that video sample footage. So here's some pictures along with the footage. So I took photos and video. And you can see the image quality is excellent, in my opinion. I think my bike looks really cool. It looks like 3D because the background's nice and blurry. And you can actually see here's a fully edited version that I used. I actually used this as a thumbnail for my video that I made for my Polygon, just upgrading some parts. So here's what the image actually looks like, all dressed up, you know, to the nines for my thumbnail image on YouTube. And here's just another. Now this one, I was just looking down at the brakes because I changed those brake pads, and just that depth of field fall off is really cool. Looks good. Here's one of the handlebars. I put new handlebars on. I just wanted to show the background out of focus there. You can see it looks really good. Nice and buttery. Here's one a little further out. And here's just one of the handlebar. And again, look at that depth of field and the rendering. It really makes the handlebar and the thumb remote here, which is what I was focusing on, stand out. And, you know, a lens like this on a full frame camera really does yield you that pop. Now here you can see another cool depth of field fall off. And what I wanted to show you was, when I go to develop mode here, is if I remove the chromatic aberration and the lens profile and you zoom in here, you can see the purple fringing on the spoke, and you can also see some of the green fringing on the disc rotor here. And if I enable this stuff, I was able to get rid of most of it. So it's fairly easy to correct, but you can still see a little bit of that green fringing there. Here's another one. I just focused on the light itself. Get a little more closer view. I was just testing the autofocus to see how it would work, and it worked really good. It locked on these lights, no problem. Sometimes lenses suffer and they hunt, but I didn't have any problems with this. I was impressed. Here's just one of the rope swing ropes, so you can see the pictures out of focus. Just, you know, an indication of the rendering you can get with this lens. Here's one of the cool wooden American flag, and here's just another one on my bike. Now if I zoom in here, just look at how sharp. I mean, you see the threads on these screws? Unbelievably sharp, and that's at f1.8. Looking good there. Oh, I wanted to show you this one. I was just testing some lens flare. So you can see here, there's a little bit of lens flare, but it's not too bad. It actually maintains contrast pretty good considering I was shooting right into the sun like that. So flare control is not that bad. It's actually pretty good. Now here you can see a little bit of purple and a little bit of green on the branches in this extremely high contrast scene. Now, just looking at this tree, I just wanted to show you the depth of field rendering on just a regular shot like this. And you can see it looks excellent. You can see the almond shapes in the background of these bouquet balls. And just look at this tree bark. I mean, that is extremely sharp. Here's just some of the rocks that were being painted. I made some pancakes for Layla this morning. They came out fantastic. Look at these beasts. Another angle. And Layla gave a thumbs up. Pancakes were good. She just woke up. But you can see here just how sharp. I mean, it looks excellent. This is just straight off the camera. I didn't do anything to it. It looks really good. And here's just Layla's art area. She's working on some projects here. These bookmarks she's making for people for Christmas, I think. Here's our never-ending Scrabble game that me and Layla are still playing. And again, just look at that depth of field fall off. Just another one. Now this one I just took because I wanted to show you how well this super high contrast scene renders. So I'm shooting this punching bag here, and again, you can see the skin, the leather skin, the detail is fantastic. And it just maintains. It looks really good. There's a very, very tiny bit of fringing here, but it's a really good lens. It's very sharp. It's got very good distortion control. The autofocus is silent, and it works very well in video and photography. To nitpick the lens a little bit, the autofocus is a little bit slow in photography mode, so it's not going to be good for sports or anything like that, or high-speed moving subjects that you're trying to track. It's not going to be good for that. So why would you want this lens over the Sony lens, which goes for $250? So this is $380. The Sony 50mm f1.8 lens goes for $250. Now, as you saw in the testing sample photos, the image quality is very similar. Not that much different. They're both very sharp. They're both sharp in the corners. I would give the Viltrox a slight edge in sharpness at f1.8, however, especially in the corner area. Also, the fringing control is a little bit better in the out-of-focus bokeh rendering areas on the Viltrox lens compared to the Sony lens, just slightly. I mean, it's not that much, but I could notice it. The biggest advantage to the Viltrox, however, is that manual aperture ring. If you're somebody that needs that, then I would I would consider getting this lens for the, for that purpose, to have that extra power. Otherwise, I would go for the Sony 50mm f1.8 lens because the image quality is very, very similar. It's hard to tell the difference between the two, although I would give the edge to the Viltrox in this case, which is probably why they're charging, an extra 100 plus for this lens, which I was honestly surprised at first when I saw the price point. I figured it would be the same price as the Sony or maybe even a little cheaper. At the end of the day, I hope you guys got something out of this review, and I do recommend the lens for those that need that manual aperture ring. Otherwise, I would consider going with the Sony. Save yourself a little money. I will catch up with you next time. I appreciate you checking out the review. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button if you thought this video was helpful, and I will catch up with you next time. All right, take care. Have a good one.